Tabula Rasa. All men are endowed with the same qualities and the same faults, without distinction of color or anatomical form. The races are equal. Joseph Auguste Antenor Furman. The premise that all humans are equal based on the potential of ending another's life is a long-standing conventional wisdom. We differ from each other by the valuation of one's dignity, and rights depend on the way in which one acquires and owns their means of participation, engagement, or involvement in public or private enterprise. The 21st century paradigm shift has long ceased to be solely the object of anti-capitalist phantasms. When are we going to get to the next batch of political economy concepts? Brilliant thinkers argue that the abolition of capitalism is an impractical idea. Even in a part of the world where the free market mechanism is not very understood or deeply theorized, it is extensively embraced and applied. Lumpen intellectuals set up scenarios for an ordinary mind to be disoriented. Every ordinary mortal feels like they have something else to say concerning distributive justice, for which the prevailing sermons have become standardized. The poor faith is imprudently based on presumptuous sentiments of knowledge and the benevolence of the elite, on the overflow of common sense, and on the ability to know reality with certainty in academia. Distributive aerodynamic calibration meets the standard of zaniness and sustainability by fooling the human senses. A pericardial window in humanity's patterns of thought suggests that the perversion of equality from an ideology into an old social concept is all the more dangerous when the defiance to social, commerce and trade, and political wrongs does not take the appropriate form of an ideological exodus attempt. There is a probable reason for the triple coincidence of wants and touch-ups: to reshuffle wealth distribution cards between the moneyers, the laboring class, and the politicians. The trial was not all about mathematics and cute graphs until recently. Tools of information manipulation are replacing neoclassical monotonous tunes in the social change mechanism. Ordinary folks embark on messianic crusades as they are persuaded that the best way to attain their social, commerce and trade and political utopia is through the capitalistic conventions of Paine's merits. In some baffling pretext, they deliberately discount the incoherence of provided facts and the value of one's means. Society is in a state of perpetual conflict, not because of competition for limited resources. The captains of industry limit the access or the availability of resources and its alternatives to lessen conflicts that they control or benefit from. The unnatural state of the business cycle creates economic immense booms and catastrophic busts. Chance against injustices have become spoken word fumbling acts. The asylum, run by the inmates, which is social inefficiency, doesn't pair up with humanity's aim at evading environmental Armageddon. The ultimate expression of what human can do with what we pull out from prejudice is exceptional. The festivities of the powers of human reason reoriented social focal points towards ideologues who make the mass gobble up codes. Solons sought to yank the most primitive elements out of humanity's mundane existence. The classical political economists drew and redrew the frontiers of humanity's harmonious existence. They were locked in the battle between flimsy empirical and hazy inductive analysis. It was a matter of sheer ego. Intellectuals viewed poor people as cattle to be herded into clearly marked cages. In the interaction between multiple ideologies, the one with the frostiest theories established primacy over the others. One would hope that these social construct properties are nothing more than a phlegm of the past, an anomaly rather than the norm. Ending up where something is exhumed out of prejudice jump-starts the process of moving away from the bad interpretation of oneself. From the assessment of slavery's varnish to the excavation of current global anxiety's cause, there is clear evidence that every society carries the same genetic disorder. The mere existence of Amish, Hasidic Jews, madrasas, tribal war, racism, and despots could pose enough evidence that we as humans are still not better than brutes in the way we use our neurons. Those common sense deterrents hold simpletons from the 21st center of gravity. How else do we reconcile the persistent global follies and pointless hostilities with pretext for socio-economic inequality and the denial of probable environmental cataclysm? We all have an inactive chromosome for a predisposition to virtue and the natural tendency to opt for evil. Without the distinction of the amount of melamine or organic shape, we are all a fusion of aptitudes and flaws. Humans, quirky propensities guarantee constant paradigm shifts. Hope is like a path in the countryside. Originally, there is nothing. But as people walk this way again and again, a path appears. Lu Xun. One could stare at a screen for hours and days, or caress a keyboard for weeks, before spitting out something worthy of consideration. There aren't many variations on that. My contradictions add to my idealism, which amplifies the difficulty in learning new emotions or interpreting facial expressions. Most of the time, I felt lifeless, irrelevant, even to myself. To engineer an alternative to capitalism, Eric Olin Wright's matrix has 3 steps: elaborating a precise diagnosis and critique of the world as it exists, envisioning viable alternatives, and understanding the obstacles, possibilities, and dilemmas of transformation. The second step prompts one to manufacture a truth. The third step aims merely to influence readers to pay greater respect to people who are making valid arguments against Monier's raison de vivre. Wright's principles are carried far and wide by dissenters who sit on their feet. The picture of Karl Marx glaring at me, his cheeks flushing, appears to offer no clue in another direction. I was, naturally, annoyed and made a pilgrimage to Highgate Cemetery in London. I was trying to piss on Herbert Spencer's grave while examining Marx's tombstone, when all made sense. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Some people hear their inner voices with great clearness. I kept hearing George Bernard Shaw mumbling. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place in my ears. It was like he was telling me that just because his voice was in my head, I should not assume that other people can hear it. Albert Einstein died, leaving on his desk an unfinished manuscript on the unified field theory. There was another grand chase, to create a world free of poverty. And that, for some, is just a thrill, or, for most, is frankly foolish. The abolition of slavery was not long ago an impossible and impractical idea. Not respecting sanctimony is rarely convenient. Naive souls who attempted to make social realities matter from within prevailing social and political systems ended up dead or morphed into an added feature of the crusher. Since the essence of existence influences more than the future of an individual, escape routes can only be found in one's desire. Social justice's aura, indispensable to separatist cults, is faltering on distributive justice awareness and relevance. Sages anticipate a burgeoning attitude shift, from not working for people to working with people. Moneyers are hurrying to make a fresh, viable condition for self-enslavement. With the help of past practice curators, they have tricked the public into believing that productivity is the only option to keep the global socio-economic boat alive. Is it a choice between prospects or gambles? This scenario obviates the nature of being human and highlights economists' hallucinations. Our obsession with how to adapt is moving humankind steadily into the dark abyss. Cooperative and self-sustaining computer connections around the world are slowly replacing formal education by offering the oldest tradable currency known in history: knowledge, in despicable quantity. The educational models today are increasingly being compressed into plots guiding students to acquire knowledge on their own. To survive the various global destructive vortexes, individuals have to continually stretch and add speed to their savior by conjoining formal education, real-life experience, and hot-off-the-internet pieces of evidence. Information technology has yet to bombard us harmoniously with disposable noises, alibis, and statistics. The vast sea of skewed information and partial evidence disrupts the slight casualty between information and wisdom. The journey from interpretation to inspiration to make information a piece of knowledge is not smooth either. When a great moment knocks on the door of your life, it is often no louder than the beating of your heart, and it is very easy to miss it. Boris Leonidovich Pasternak. All human beings have a talent for picking up the vibration of events. Despots are frightened by it. Radicals tend to be overwhelmed by it. Moneyers want to profit from it. The rest do not know what to do with it. It is a weird and weary place to be, to lose control of your life, but not your will. The ability to socialize and to learn how to socialize can be autonomized without losing the human factor. For academics, a mistake is not a pretext for leaving nature take its course. It is an opportunity to conjure up another Machiavellian scheme. The trimming down of what is to be human into prudence or solidarity is the root of all evil in economics. One clique has portrayed human beings as cold, calculating machines pursuing prudence. They have reinforced a moneyer's view of the betterment of society. The other group focuses on imposing a sense of cohesion, as they believe that human solidarity is the only way to curb injustice. They have reworked Marxist shenanigans to deem acceptable the 21st century world. Minds which are not filled with economics lexicons easily grasp the confusion and meaninglessness arising from current diabolic arguments. Debating on the same old ideas is, frankly, pointless. We persistently keep trying to repair something that is burned for the sake of memories or laziness. Living beings have to inhale the sin around them, and awareness of their insomnia shades the validity of the accusations in my frustration. The super rich's fortune is no longer attached to visible infrastructure. New social concept scarcity is organic when we let the old way of doing business creep in with the aim of distributing the loot appropriately among members of a given enterprise. We have been lucky so far. We have had couple global and regional heart attacks, but no stroke. Utopian ideals persist in the collective consciousness despite the absence of a robust intellectual foundation because people feel the paradigm shift deep in their guts. Time makes all observations constructed through human interaction with others fallible, and all theories revisable and perishable. Merchants of ideas should not just grumble and gesticulate their frustrations about this. The disenfranchised have been throwing a tantrum a different way. There is a morbid satisfaction in patronizing our own by helping somebody who looks like us climb onto our backs and get a seat at the ogre's table. Socioeconomic avengers are making the idea of kissing the boar and kissing the farmer seem to be an appealing option. Capitalism gatekeepers and Shinigami phonies' sense of misery starts with, the study shows. The descendants attest, with a certain degree of delusional hope, that the scheme is doomed to self-destruction. In these days and ages, anyone who believes that communism is the only way of human life is probably a Red Army fugitive living in the Dark Age and needs to come out. Activists bursting with the fuming desire to save the world are only good for parades. Their solutions intensify the margin of the tragedy and the difference between equality and probability. In a limited number of cantons, minute compared to the whole society, anger has been directed against only one aspect of capitalism or communism which affected that particular community at that specific time. None of the emissaries of the past are adequately equipped to address existing social glitches. Their recipes on the table lie in the fact that they come from times and places that don't exist anymore. Living is not synonymous with merely having movement. It is moving in accordance with one's will. One could say that, with deeds, one begins to really live. Accordingly, when one moves by means of one's own will, and this leads to the destruction of one's body, this is not a negation of life. It is an affirmation. Fumiko Kaneko. The Neoplatonism, the Marabouts, the Spanish sages, and other aficionados in scholasticism from different periods have all based their recommendations on their apprehension of the bubble they dwelt in. Time bends and blends fate. Past waves of Pensée clusters have sought to discover the central theme in everyday life sagas of people trying to satisfy their needs while others abuse them or make profit from their wants. The venial sin in social analysis was lack of feeling, emotion, interest, and concern for the poor's physical and financial well-being. It conflated the privileged, senseless measure of success and peasants' firm, religiously based irrational convictions. The particular tendency to use clique beliefs and practices one is most familiar with as reference for the norm impaired the meaning of merit in the allotment of privileges and burdens. Two notions gathered a consensus, that the laboring class was immature, and the racial scale of humanness went down from white, the humans, to blacks, the beasts. Intellectual recognition was a matter of judgment residing in the basilica or the aristocracy's sentiment. It was in the best interest of the intelligentsia to reinforce repulsive prejudices by spitting out hypotheses that push forward the frontiers of collective consciousness degradation. These were the days when protesters were slaughtered, rationalists burned on crosses, and humans owned humans. The functional side of the planet, thus doused, left the 20th century with a hefty dose of uncertainty about the future. The 21st century has the opportunity, the right excuse, and the means to redirect the locomotive pulling the social, commerce and trade, and political wagons onto the right track, in the right direction, and to the right destination. The visible pile of capitalism's casualties and anonymous offshore companies' vulnerabilities is setting differences in motion. To be born and grow up in a sea of pain is not enough anymore to make one believe that the whole world is nothing more than one big lonely city. A juristic shift in pleas is reshaping the orthodox concept of general improvement in living standards. The wretched way of articulating the right use of money is diffusing the rich person's childish privileges. The world is not becoming less Western. The periodic global variation is becoming less familiar to the Western baron. New wizard apprentices are demanding a broadband to the approach to economic teaching that would help them to constructively and compressively dissect phenomena their contemporary humans confront. Bitter controversy developed over the validity of the benefit of Western social policies began to draw challenges from the shittiest place on earth where these are implemented. The quest for enhancing the human experience has shifted gears. To a negligible degree, progress has been made in terms of portraying commoners as greedy, lascivious, and deceitful in a lesser, pathetic way. Despite the fact that Western framework is the most inappropriate way to generalize behavioral undercurrents in a culturally vibrant world, the rest of social science relies crippling on it for everything. There is more going on than the snubbing of the cradle of thoughts as if reality is static or the argument is already won. Counting and arithmetic were kept for a long time as the bourgeoisie panache. Mathematics made its druids claim of fame. Humanity's spine's refurbishment, or blurring the line between individual liability and collective responsibility, is enormously more lucrative than finding failures, deflating ideologies, and preventing catastrophe. It is a daunting task to gauge the authenticity of hypocrisy in a field such as economics, theology, or politics when vanity and insatiability are in it in equal measure. Algorithms, recreating human decision-making processes, hold the ability to flip-flop on a more sophisticated level, which makes us human. The heterogeneity of discourse is useless when squabblers are looking for record adulation and applause from stalwart supporters of their tenets. An emotional debt is hard to square. Robert Peck. Despair is a psychedelic that doesn't induce a euphoria, but imparts the feeling of what it means to be human. Disparity takes the ugliest shape in just this pandemic when it is fueled by wealth segregation and intellectual prejudice. The grouping of the have-alls and the have-notas is not done based on merit. One does not cross from one of these rigid blocks to another by adopting the other side's beliefs. As far as the rich are concerned, there's no issue as to whether the kill or be killed mentality is right or wrong. It is just the law of nature. The poor believe this too. We are all prisoners of idiotic and maladroit conventions. Our lives are full of absurd self-assurance rituals. The defining factor in the housing market bubble in different places and times exposes the same stupid, hopeless optimism that fills the head of rich and poor alike. Defying norms with arrogance involves denying ourselves nothing but the truth. Our current overappreciation of the Western Hemisphere mischaracterized the triumph of right over wrong. The Industrial Revolution created a marked wedge between social classes, spewing mistrust, discord, and antagonism. Humans who chewed up other humans' hopes were not rare as hen's teeth. Productivity became synonymous with profit. For the European elite, it was a time of change, a time of great upheaval. For everyone else, it was time for comfy misery. Plantation owners sought the boys, men, and women solely based on their talents. For the girls, their copulation, subservience to their masters was an additional criterion. Fervent defenders of the right to act, speak, or think as being inherent to all human beings did not manumit their slaves. Their compromise reconciles liberty and the inevitability of evil in their colonies with the sphere of influence's expansion principle. During the 20th century, Every social, commerce and trade, and political construct underwent more than rhinoplasties in a desperate effort to escape responsibility. For the right reasons, the capital is still defined as the part of wealth which was devoted to obtaining further wealth, as Alfred Marshall stated. The profane views of the labor class and hierarchical arrangements between commerce and trade actors remain the same. By lumping the poor together and poor countries in one pile, every side's propaganda machine was able to point out and sell stories of tragedy and triumph. The hoi polloi sleepwalked to a factory and performed a limited number of tasks. For their pathetic contribution, they received a minimal means of remaining in existence until their productivity mileage ran out, after which they were sent home with a bouquet of flowers to wait for impending death. This cycle made life a pointless charade. The alchemists, in their search for gold, discovered many other things of greater value. Arthur Schopenhauer. In the olden days, minuscule and frail creatures were drugged and sequestered to be transformed into killing machines. The boys, who successfully completed the journey to becoming a man, eagerly sought to prove their sadism in battle to move higher up the feudalism pyramid ranks. The ones who could not be converted into ogres were trained to be métiers to make and maintain items indispensable to their community. A fraction of this group went on to learn how to identify the properties of materials. The skilled and reputable self-employed artisans who safeguarded their particular trade traditions and rituals took countless tyros under their wings, from apprentice to journeyman. Only a number of them became master craftsmen. The king granted land to barons and vassals as he felt fit. This guild and knighthood system blueprint was not particular to a continent or a savage age. Once moneyers mastered the art of illegitimate private gain, they began to dream of a perfect value-adding process. The transformation of the traditional class of farmers from an agrarian society into an industrial one squashed labor liberty and guillotined the labor class's ability to emancipate itself. After a more mature consideration of the Industrial Revolution, which had emboldened the bourgeois in different places, moneyers arrived at the conclusion that they had merely misunderstood domination's meaning. Captains of industry retraced their steps and at length succeeded in finding the key in one of the doorways where the people had at first appeared to know nothing about profit: academia. By externalizing the cost of training and building a workforce ready to be abused, moneyers opened formal education's floodgates. The devious philanthropy of moneyers who no longer believed in the salvation of their businesses through Christ opened another gate to the poor: higher learning. It led to the proliferation of science knowledge applications. It is hard to break shackle of self-enslavement. The motivations of the industrialist moguls in democratizing education were not complex and varied. The poor sought security by learning a trade in order to join a business. For moneyers, the scheme ricocheted, fueled by a philosophical shift in the academic elite spirit of intellectualism, which served as a trampoline of their factory's throughput. The long-standing division of labor slogans and the modern specialization speculation anthem have come to rationalize overconsumption without paying attention to the new, quaint decor behind the scene. The impotence of the old standards is becoming profound, as our psychological cravings are becoming central to human existence. Scholars mostly underappreciate the true essence of the paradigm shift, the direct consequence of the 20th century social, commerce and trade, and political metamorphosis. A skill or a trade, or getting the aptitude to perform a specific set of tasks, is undoubtedly less significant than a means of developing the ability to act in diverse functions. What makes the 21st century a special time? The location and number of individuals who are acquiring and accruing superb means of participation, engagement, or involvement in contemporary discussions or enterprises have prompted creativity ecosystems all over the world. The egotistical way of covering the scent of ideological mortality is by devaluating startling present-day, large-scale socioeconomic paradoxes. Spectrums of gadgets have heightened awareness. They are empowering learners to critically assess voices in their heads. Every day, folks have gained the right to conscious and the ability to code the future. In the Western Hemisphere, they are aware of both. The means of production has been demoted. Humans spend more time collectively scoping, promoting, and fine-tuning foods and goods than farming or producing amenities. A paradigm shift and genetic code rewrite threaten to give way to a different form of beings or natural selection. New devices have demonstrated that the human brain is much more sophisticated than when we previously thought. Expanding from this neurophysiology breakthrough, the shockwave of behavioral economists' verdicts should have been felt beyond academia. The melancholic social scientist verdict is falling short in its importance by resisting the implication towards the bizarre and mind manipulation. Victorian guesses currently being used to justify why individuals do what they do are no longer adequate. It is challenging to explain to insiders the sins of their fathers. Socioeconomic disparity has long degraded from organic to inorganic. The power of common sense should have sufficed to loosen capitalism's grip over our mindset, just as it did to socialism, communism, fascism, and anarchism. Collectively, the information superhighway did make us more eloquent and smarter sounding. Humanity as a whole needs a mental shift and a moral reboot to break the psychological contract that has tethered humanity to old social, commerce and trade, and political arrangements far too long. Humanity is waiting for a proper reason to revise the catalog of what would make the world a better place. I am providing two reasons. Ordinary mortals owning their means of engagement, participation, or involvement has become a global culture. Capital is in the 21st century that the means which are locked into obtaining wealth, ergo, it worth repeating here that instead of the average number of labor hours, the quality of the means necessary in an enterprise to produce a commodity or provide a service establishes relative prices. There is no original truth, only original error. Gaston Bachelard. The renewed sense of challenging the fundamental principle of loot sharing has been misguided. The most critical aspect of universal dissatisfaction in terms of social arrangements has mainly been snubbed in the ongoing debate over humans' primitive motives and obscene fantasies. Nihilism permeates the inner nature of few human beings. Thinkers of remarkable objectivity who have made the world a scientific arena obsessively pushed and pulled logic from every angle. When individuals who were struck by an instinct for verity examined humans, they always found indignity. Their most extreme fluctuations gave us great concepts. They were aware how dangerous their ideas were, but they made their positions very clear. Despite their spiritual qualms about the answers, they stood their ground. Some hallucinations take a very long time before society and technology make them into reality. And perhaps the most valuable byproduct of their exertion in declining divine surveys, common mortals became instrumental in propelling the emancipation of the working class crusade. On the surface, classical economics is facing the fading of public trust. Cryptocurrencies are crippling the public psyche and make us rethink the monetary circuit. The dismemberment of commerce and trade interplays is starting to be infused with socially inclusive approaches. The goal has become to help impoverished people attain the financial stability to stimulate the consumer cycle. Wealth redistribution on a national or international scale, just as tax hikes to punish ruthless, greedy creatures, is seen as the cures. Newfangled rationalizations of moneyers' influences and shoppers' impulses are steadily brewing. Alas, in reality, classical political economy pure thinking is still the main contributor to the inquiry into the world. The character of social and justice assumptions over the last century is the same under the globalization banner. Talking to's most admired, on both sides, are simply noises. Without peeling off more layers, we would certainly misidentify the mechanization craze as mortal sin. Revamped globalization schemes have weakened captains of industry muscles and have pluralized oligarchs' circles. Nonetheless, an investment in knowledge and the pain of keeping up with the changes guarantees a higher return, but not the fair amount. Unlike the previous type of customers, shoppers' confidence varies often, and often contains fragments of more than one characteristic. The new humans react to the same thing very differently. Enterprise survival depends now on a consistency in figuring out step-by-step human and animal decision-making process. An organization preference, shrewdness, and good judgment have to converge in order to break shoppers' indifference and to gain from the commerce and trade dynamic. Who is an entrepreneur or is taking on greater than normal financial risk in an enterprise? Everybody who has tied their means of engagement, participation, or involvement into the scam. The conceptors, people who generate or conceive ideas or plans, and the moneyers have appropriated the title of entrepreneur for themselves. In doing so, They alone reap all of the benefits and rewards of what the conductors, the curators, and everyone else sows. The carafes of everybody's sweat and hard works extract are labeled profit. Yet, nobody stands to correct the vile mistake of leaving out other conspirators of an enterprise's monetary and social surplus.